Hi, this is Dave, and before we get to the show, I wanted to ask you a favor. One of our goals this year is to grow the show so that What Does Star Wars Mean to You reaches more listeners. And that's where we're asking you for help. And it's really easy. Wherever you listen to us, please hit that subscribe button. If you're liking the show, give us a 5-star rating and review on the platform you listen to us. We make a lot of fun of the algorithm and the smash that button thing, but it really does help us get noticed by new fans. And if you want to join in on the conversation, find us on social at Star Wars Mean to You. That's Star Wars Mean, the number 2 in the letter U. Now, let's chat some Star Wars.
I mean, it's very simple. I mean, again, you know, when I think back on it, that there's that moment. I mean, we talked a little bit about it of like seeing Star Wars. I was 7 years old and sitting through it twice with my father.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Dave.
And I'm Laura.
And welcome to What Does Star Wars Mean to You? Our guest today is well known as a creator, writer, and producer. He's worked on Saturday Night Live, Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Seinfeld. He was one of the co-creators of the animated series Clerks, as well as the showrunner on Veep. But he's also a collector, which, with co-host Ryan Condel, inspired him to create the podcast The Stuff Dreams Are Made Of. And like any great collector, he's an avid Star Wars fan, with an most impressive Star Wars collection. And he wrote the book on Ralph McQuarrie Star Wars art, appropriately entitled Star Wars Art. Ralph McQuarrie. Please give a warm hello there to David Mandel.
Thank you. I think you meant to say boringly titled.
No, not at all.
You just get Star Wars art and Ralph McQuarrie into the title. That's all you need.
Yeah.
I know, it always feels like, and I technically co-wrote it, but it always feels like it should be called like the art of Ralph. Like there should be an of in there or something. There's like a preposition missing. I feel like, I don't know, somewhere along the way they cut our preposition budget and we lost out on an of. Yeah.
Just those 2 letters. Those were
once we got into 2 volumes, we had to make cuts, and the of was the first thing to go. Yeah.
We can't afford an of in the title.
The ink. So we like to kick off every episode with our 5 with the Force, just to kind of get your Star Wars baseline. So the first question is, which Star Wars movie is your go-to favorite?
The original. By the way, I should, for religious purposes, I only literally acknowledge the original 3 movies. I don't even pretend the other ones exist anymore. We can fight about that later, but at this point, I'm done with all of it. Just the original 3, anyway.
I love that. Continue. That's for religious purposes. Yes. Yeah. We'll dive into that in a bit.
Reformed Judaism, but go on.
Dave, can I get you to roll a d6? I do not have one nearby.
5.
Okay, what is your favorite Star Wars alien?
Favorite Star Wars alien. I'm sure it has a name with, I think it starts with an I, like Ick or something, but I'm going Hammerhead. So there you go.
Oh,
I know he has a name. I don't care. All those names were made up later. Hammerhead. That was the toy.
Yes.
Hammerhead. That guy. Yeah.
Love that guy.
A quick follow-up on Hammerhead.
Yeah.
I feel like we run across a lot of people who say Hammerhead is one of their favorite alien.
I always liked it. I mean, as a kid, it was definitely one of the ones, like as a kid, I always say, like, I saw the original movie Star Wars. I was the perfect age. I'm born in 1970. I was 7 years old. It was perfection. And that was one where there was just no sense of like there's a human in there, if that makes any sense. Like, even though there is a human in there, but you know what I mean? Like it was like, how does that exist? Like there's a sense of there's a guy in Chewbacca, there's a guy in Greedo. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The Sand people are guys, but that was one that it was just like, ping, you know, like I don't understand how movies are made. I don't understand how that seems real. And then I will give credit, even though I hate everything that they've done ever since the original trilogies, I will give a lot of credit to, I particularly loved in the Clone Wars, the Getty, what's his name? Getty,
Clone Wars.
Cartoon, the animated, the shorts, the Clone Wars shorts. Getty, Watanabe? No.
Tartakovsky.
Oh my God! Yeah,
he's way better with names.
Yeah, Watanabe is an act. Watanabe's an actor. I'm sorry. It seems like, I don't know what actor I was thinking. Anyway, Getty Tartakovsky, when he all of a sudden did and all of a sudden there was like a Hammerhead Jedi and shit like that. I did enjoy that. So I feel like I feel like I'll give it up for people that have done other things with Hammerhead since then. But yeah, that's the reason why I think originally. Yeah. In my collection, I actually have a really cool Ron Cobb drew an early Hammerhead even before Star Wars for like some other project. And then kind of when he needed aliens for George, kind of took Hammerhead and brought him over. And I have this early Cobb drawing that's really, really cool.
Oh, wow. That is cool.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, we're going to dive into your collection.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
No, I love it.
Do you ever take it out and get an eraser and just be like, I could erase this?
No,
oh my God.
No, it does not occur to me. I take it out and look at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave is the like walking example of letting your intrusive thoughts win. No. What is your favorite Star Wars line to quote?
I do like "That's no moon." It comes up a lot. I don't know, when my kids were younger, somehow you're always like, you're always like out and looking and whatever, and just a lot of "That's no moon." Yes. When what's that? The moon? That's no moon. Just over and over and over again ad nauseum. Yeah.
Kind of similar to that. Can you do any impressions or impersonations?
Oof, I'm not. That is not. That is not one of my areas. I can do it's Star Wars adjacent. I'm sorry. I can do the little Maharaja kid from Temple of Doom.
Okay.
It's very beginning, where he's sitting there and they're talking about the Thuggee and he hasn't said a word and they're going on and on about all these things. And all of a sudden he goes, I've heard the stories of the Thuggee. There's an impression for you. Yeah.
All right. I love it. Okay. Last of the 5 with the Force. Besides the movies, what's your favorite content? It can be anything from TV to comic books, novels, collections, games.
For me, the original Marvel comic run was, especially the original adaptation, but even honestly, the run was pretty great to me, just because the original 6 issues were the adaptation. And when issue 7 came out, which was a Han Solo Chewbacca story of them, like alone, it was just like, because at the time, again, 7 years old, Han and Chewie were the bee's knees. And and then all of a sudden, an adventure of them, a new story, it just didn't seem possible. And so it was just like, what? And it just like, I can remember that sensation. Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. The comic book was so fascinating because it felt like they were taking Star Wars and acid at the same time in making stories.
Well, I think there's a lot of stories in there. And again, some of this is more me just reading about stuff. But, as it went on and, they definitely had issues where they would pitch stuff. And I guess it would get close to like what Lucas was thinking about for the sequels. And so he would just say no or give them rules like you can't use Vader and they would kind of whatever. And so I do think sometimes in desperation, they were just like buying random sci-fi stories and turning them into Star Wars and taking like old inventory stories that they had laying around and just be like, all right, now this is like, take this Planet of the Apes story and now it's Star Wars. And so there is an element of that which definitely increases a little bit of the trippiness. But there is some really solid stuff that's as good as anything I feel like that showed up, in the later years, certainly. Yeah.
That's an interesting history of the comics I wasn't totally aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just the race to get a comic out monthly. Because, for the first, whatever it was, 120 issues, it came out every month, basically,
right.
Whatever that is, however many years, yeah.
Now, can you take us through how you were first introduced to Star Wars and what that experience was like?
For me, and it's funny, I don't have any great memory of an awareness of it before I saw it in the theater. I'm not saying I might have seen a TV commercial. I might have seen a movie trailer. It's certainly possible. But again, I was 7 years old, and so I wasn't necessarily reading Starlog or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't going to San Diego Comic-Con. I wasn't doing, I was doing whatever 7-year-olds do. So my awareness really is going to it for the first time. Mm-hmm. And we went to one of I think it was the Lowe's Astor Plaza in New York City, which is in Times Square, big theater. I think that's where it was early on. Wow. For a long time, I thought in my head it was the Ziegfeld, but I think it was the Lowe's Astor. And my father was a big fan of sitting through things twice if they were good, of getting your money's worth. And so we saw Star Wars and we saw it twice because it was so good.
That's awesome.
And I remember just being absolutely blown away by it. I remember my parents absolutely refusing to buy the early bird kit, that was just that was some sort of weird scam.
Yep.
Mhm.
I had one of the early bootleg red flashlights with the tube. It was like sort of a reddish orange. It was a well-known version of it, but it was not officially licensed. But
it was like the laser sword.
Yeah, exactly. But we had two of those. I had a younger sister, and we had two of those, and my friends all got them and whatever. And then when the action figures did start to come out, those action figures were very much, I don't have a sense of the schedule now. And so in my mind, it seemed like there was a new figure every week, but I know that wasn't true. But first the original 12 and then the extra 2 and whatever, that carried me forward over those next couple of years as I sort of built my sort of Star Wars toy collection where, certainly Star Wars, I had everything, every vehicle, every figure, whatever. And then into Empire, where I then still had figures, maybe less of the vehicles. And then eventually by the time Jedi, I was 13, a little too old for action figures. So I had a couple of them. But certainly the early years of the Kenner, and by the way, the 12-inch too, carried me sort of through those first couple of years of Star Wars for me. Yeah.
Wow.
Now, did you have the curse of the mom who throws away your collection, or do you still have some of those?
I have a couple of things that I had as a kid. I think some stuff, I don't know if she really threw it away, but at some point or another, like we gave things away, together. I can't sit here and say to you like, oh, I had the mint in the package. So I guess I don't have some of the ones I played with, but certainly they were beater at best. And so when I moved out, I'm jumping way ahead, but when I moved out in 1995, I moved to Los Angeles to go to work for Seinfeld. And I was living in New York and I moved out to LA. And when I moved out to LA, I went, that would have been 95, the summer of 95, that July, I went to my first San Diego Comic-Con, started going to different, toy shows and Comic-Cons and whatnot. And starting in like 95, I think I rebought like just every figure and like vehicle, just kind of nice, but like loose.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then once I had that, I very quickly started on the plan to basically have it all in mint on card and just basically put that together over the next couple of years. Basically, I bought a giant collection of basically like every figure at one point because there's no easy way of saying this. I was a single guy living in a rental apartment, driving a leased car, working 7 days a week at the most popular show on television. And just like spending money on nothing because we were eating our meals at our office, 3 meals a day, whatever. And so when someone kind of came along at the time and went, do you want to buy like every Star Wars figure? Which is like, yes, I do. And so, so that's when I kind of sort of put that collection together and that still exists. Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow. I love how I love the emphasis on all of the different vehicles because I was also obsessed with those. I was a prequel kid, but I had all of the vehicles from the prequel trilogy and my mom had hung them from my ceiling in my room so that like they were like floating. It was very cute.
Excellent.
Yeah. So from one vehicle lover to another.
That is really, really great. No, those Star Wars vehicles, I mean, my favorite toy up till that point had been probably the Mego superhero figures. And there was a Batmobile and there was a Batcopter and stuff like that. But I don't know, there was just something about the size of like to have those spaceships. And that Millennium Falcon was one of that and the Death Star were just two of the great toys ever. Just like with real playability. I mean, as I remember it, just hours upon hours. Yeah.
I had the Death Star secondhand, so it didn't have any of the walls. It didn't have the.
It was still under construction. It's fine. It was just
it was the Death Star too.
So between 83 and 95, the end of Return of the Jedi, and then kind of the resurgence of your love for Star Wars collecting, did you collect anything between there? Like, did you kind of, I see people have two paths at the end of Return of the Jedi. One is they go, well, I'm kind of done with Star Wars and toys and I'm going to grow up now. And the other path is, I love Star Wars and toys and I'm going to stay here and just hope that someone throws me a lifeline and Hasbro comes out with a Power of the Force line in 95.
I guess I'm slightly in between, maybe I guess more, I mean, I hate to say done. I definitely wasn't decorating my place with Star Wars stuff. But again, you know, when there were things that were still around of my Star Wars toys. So they weren't all gone, but at the same time, they weren't necessarily prominent. However,
Yep.
I did always love, and I've talked about this a little bit with a bunch of friends. I'm not going to sit here and say to you specifically, like, I'm a comedy writer because of Star Wars, but Star Wars definitely got me interested in how movies were made.
Mm-hmm.
And so going back to the various, like, you know, they would have those TV shows where it would be like, you know, the making ofs and all that kind of stuff. I was very into those, started getting then into Starlog and movie magazines and things. And so I was definitely, even in that period, because I was a comic book reader, so I was still, reading Star Wars comics. I think they had ended before 95, but whenever, I don't remember when they ended, I've lost track of dates, but I definitely took that to the bitter end. And then whenever it was that Dark Horse started up, and whenever like those Timothy Zahn novels came out, which I think is before 95, I think, maybe, or right around 95. I've lose all track. Yeah.
Yeah. The Timothy Zahn books were around 90, 91.
Okay. So
92.
I was like, I read those. I bought those in hardcover and read those.
Yeah.
And so I definitely, from, I guess, maybe more of a reading standpoint, I kept my hand in Star Wars in that sense. I was still very into, like, any kind of making of or anything like that. I was probably vaguely following rumors that they might make more, which of course at that point they never were. I was reading Starlog magazine. So if anything, you know, sometimes they would just go like, oh, it's the 10th anniversary. And then they would, you know, and they would have new articles. And so I was very conscious of all of that. But at the same time, I wasn't necessarily, there was no Star Wars poster on my wall. Does that kind of explain it a little bit?
Yeah,
sort
I think that's
straddling a line there somewhere.
Yeah, it's still within your orbit, but it's not
I was
your whole
super
world.
interested in it, but it was definitely not like, I wasn't sitting there like crying that they weren't making more toys. Yeah.
Sure.
So you saw that video of me from 1991. Okay.
So you end up in San Diego. You're kind of like starting to build the early phases of your collection now. I have to ask, I think one of the things that Dave and I love to ask collectors is, why do you think people collect? Like, what is it that drives the collection?
I mean, it's very simple. I mean, again, you know, when I think back on it, that there's that moment. I mean, we talked a little bit about it, of like seeing Star Wars. I was 7 years old and sitting through it twice with my father.
Yeah.
And connected to that, I can even remember when I got the treasury-sized Marvel comic. Those were the large ones that had like 3, you know, and I can remember those and reading those like on the beach after the movie, because now I have the movie in my hands. And so these are very distinct memories, but it's like, I can't, well, I guess maybe I could, you know, what am I going to own? The seats from the theater? You know what I mean? Like so how do you possess a memory? And it's quite hard. But certainly the toys, and then for me, where I kind of took it to, where I started collecting movie props and production related things, it's sort of owning a little piece of that moment, even though not really. And that's, I guess, my explanation of it. Yeah.
I'd agree with that.
I kind of liken it to, and when you said, how do you possess a memory? This instantly what I thought of is, when I'm decorating a Christmas tree, every ornament I take out has a story attached to it.
Yes, exactly. Yes, people definitely,
So in collecting, like, very much, I can look back to my figures and I go, oh, I got that in a antique store.
I know where I was where I got that one. This one was a really hard one to find, or I traded my buddy for this, or whatever it is. But again, it's those stories. And I love every one of those stories, but ultimately, beyond the story of how those pieces came to be, those pieces are sort of really representing me sitting in that theater. I mean, that's
Yes.
really what it ultimately is. So yeah.
Yeah.
When you were collecting in 95 and you go down to San Diego Comic-Con and you're like, oh, wow, I can get this stuff.
Right.
What was kind of your first goal? Like, people call it a white whale, but I think that's...
I wasn't up to that yet. I was honestly just kind of like, oh, here are some really nice versions of like the 12-inch figures. And like I had most of them, but I don't think I ever had, I can't remember. I know I had Boba Fett. I don't think I had IG-88. Now I'm going to buy IG-88. And again, they're all just kind of loose, but I'm just kind of throwing them on the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't ever cook and no one ever comes over, but now they're on my dining room table, that kind of a thing. You know what I mean? And it was just very, at that point, it was still just sort of like, this is fun. There was no quest. And then I started to dig a little deeper. There was a great show in LA that used to be called StarCon. And there were these, some of like the hardcore collectors probably remember them better than I. There were these two women, older women, Anne and Judy. And I honestly couldn't tell you if they were sisters, if they were a couple, if they were just partners. I don't know what they were. These two old ladies, or they seemed old. I'm sure they were like 30, you know what I mean? No, they seemed old at the time. And they would turn up with like interesting stuff where like they would turn up and like, here's an old set of Star Wars sheets, or here's a roll of like wallpaper, or the Sigma stuff, but mint in the packaging, whatever. And so I started buying some of that stuff, and oh my God, Empire Strikes Back placemats. And so I started to get sucked into just weird odds and ends of things as they were kind of turning up. And then at some point I started to think very seriously about, I want a cherry, perfect bubbles, no punch on the card, blah, 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 insanity.
Yeah.
Like the graded 9.0.
Yes, exactly.
Higher.
Well, you mentioned earlier too about like, trading items or, acquiring items in kind of interesting ways. I think the question is how do you normally go about sourcing or acquiring new pieces? And do you have any like fun stories that are like, you won't believe how I acquired this?
Back in the day, when I both had, I don't know, like life seems simpler, but it was probably because the internet quite wasn't the internet. You know what I mean? And so even into the early days of eBay, where not everyone quite trusted it. Whereas nowadays, anybody that has anything really great, it's probably going to end up in an auction. There's no, I mean, I hate to say it, it just kind of is. But back then you could hunt stuff down. You could turn stuff up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. Even back then, there were like the Star Wars 1 cover, the original art to the Star Wars 1 cover, that turned up in just a comic art auction. So again, I bought it, the original art to the Chaykin poster that they gave away at San Diego, that showed up in a random, so it was an auction, but it showed up like in a strange category. It wasn't
weird.
It wasn't in like a movie poster auction. Yeah. So like things like that. The craziest story, and I've told this elsewhere, but I'll tell you guys, the craziest story ever that was this was definitely later on, so it's more an example of a more recent story, but it's kind of just these things do happen. I went on a really crazy deep dive on the Burger King posters, the Coca-Cola posters that they made the glasses out of, those original posters that they gave away. And I'd always been obsessed with those, and obviously I had the glasses, and then I definitely had all the various, like the mobile and like the different hanging things and all that kind of stuff. And I loved it. And I went on kind of a deep dive into like who the artist was and sort of tried to track him down and his family down, and sort of a no-go. And somewhere at some point or another, I bumped into this crazy post, not a crazy post, just a post, but a very old post from like years and years ago, from the early days on, I think it was on Rebel Scum. And it was a guy basically posting saying, like, my dad worked for Coca-Cola. We've got the paintings for these posters. I tried to sell them to George Lucas. What do you think they're worth? And then he kind of disappeared. And there was no way of getting a hold of him, but there was some basic information. And at some point or another, and I'm not making this up, my daughter was going into preschool, and we met some of the other new parents. And there was a couple, and it was two moms. And one of the moms worked in animation, and the other mom was, believe it or not, a private investigator. And years
Oh,
later,
wow.
I ended up hiring her I gave her the information. I said, it's a guy. I think he's in Georgia. This is his first name. It's like a lot of this and whatever. And she kind of didn't have success for a little bit. And then I found like another clue or two and kind of whatever. The next thing I knew, it was just like, here's his phone number. He's waiting for your call. And she tracked him down and I worked out a deal. I got the deal done. So yeah, like so crazy things like that. But
That's
I don't know, you just would
fantastic.
find stuff. You could walk into like a weird little store and they would have something that they were willing to sell that they didn't think was $1 million. It was just a different time way back. But the private eye, that's a good story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you have to go that route, right?
In talking about like the Burger King glasses and the action figures, I also feel like you made a shift into collecting screen used items.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a very like sort of long trip to that. I mean, it doesn't, in years, it may not have seemed as long because it was more sort of like around 97, I think. So having made the decision to go after sort of the toys, I had as one say this, I acquired basically every toy I wanted. Now, I never obsessed on like I had to have every card back. Early on, I was very much interested in basically the first card they came on, meaning the card that I would have bought them on. And people do it however they want to do it. That's what I was obsessed with. And so someone might look at my collection and go, well, you don't have all the Power of the Force figures. Because I don't fucking care. I mean, again, it's my collection. So, So there are technically holes, but for me, I felt like I had everything I was interested in. So I sort of had felt like I achieved it all. And what that then did was it sort of did two things. So on one prong, I did start exploring like prototype toys and packaging art and all sorts of weird prototypes, which is a never-ending slippery slope. And then at some point I had to like kind of go, I need some order here. And I sort of tried to sub-concentrate and just kind of go, I'm not going to try and collect everything because everything is insane. And I started trying to concentrate on Chewbacca as a character and just like, I'll be obsessive, but I'll be obsessive like this, as opposed to a little bit of everything. So that was sort of one path that my collecting took once I kind of felt like I had all the toys. And then the other version was into the props, because again, it's sort of like there's no other figure to buy. And so at some point or another, oddly enough, in a toy magazine, in Toy Shop magazine, which in the 90s was sort of the toy buying central, newspaper. It was that newspaper format with lots of, phone auctions and write for price lists and things like that. Or, an ad would come out and you'd pay extra to get FedEx to copy. So you'd have it on the West Coast the same day the people on the East Coast did, because all of a sudden there'd be like, some rare like Uze figure. And, if you weren't the first person that called, you weren't going to get it. Yeah. But in that magazine or newspaper, I should say, one day there was an ad for an auction for a screen-used Return of the Jedi Stormtrooper helmet.
Wow.
And I was very intrigued and ended up sort of winning it with a caveat that I was going to be allowed to take it to Steve Sansweet and make sure it was real, that it was what they were saying it was. And I didn't know Steve at all. I'd seen him at shows and stuff, but I knew somebody that kind of knew him. And I was lucky enough, I was a Seinfeld writer, which at least at the time, I think for Steve, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, I think he felt on some level he's got a job and he's a normal human and he's not coming to murder me.
Sure.
So
exactly.
I won this thing in auction and I got it sent to me and I brought it over to Steve's. And this is when he was still living in LA. This is before he went to work for Lucas. This is many, 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 many years ago.
Yeah.
And we got to compare it to the helmet that he had in his collection. And, it passed muster and big thumbs up and whatever. And that was really my first screen used prop. And I certainly didn't jump into my second one immediately. But at the same time, at that point forward, I was definitely starting to pay more attention to production items and things. So and that kind of sent me down that path as well. And then somewhere in the middle of all of that, like I said, there's comic and comic art related stuff, but I also movie art, McQuarrie originals, which is something obviously led to the book a little bit, but just all sorts of anything connected to the making of Star Wars in a variety of different fields.
Yeah. I am in awe of your collection, especially
very kind.
The comic book issue #1 cover. I'm very much into comic book art as well, and Star Wars is obviously important to me. How do you display your collection? Do you rotate a display of collections? And how do you store your collection? Do you store it in such a way you can have easy access to it, or do you deep vault it?
Well, I mean, everything is sort of locked up, but it can be pulled out, if that makes any sense, or at least a lot of it. And the art is all sort of like, how does one say? All of the art is in archival sleeves, and then those sleeves are inside like Itoya folders, which allow you to kind of page turn, because I do like I have a couple of sequences of things, like for example in Star Wars 6, which is the final issue of the original whatever. I've been lucky enough, I've put together a lot of that book. Like I actually have, believe it or not, like a lot of pages. So I have pages, a bunch of consecutive pages, especially of the back end, the battle. And so I really like the idea that I can turn the pages of this folder and I'm reading a comic, even though I'm reading the art, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
So, but then those folders are then locked up. So, I mean, it gets a little bit of everything. And I do try and display stuff. I have my pre-marriage condo, which I sort of have turned into my office. That I that's where I kind of keep everything, my collection, I guess, kind of locked up. So I visit it and it's there. But
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. But look, I certainly don't think poorly of somebody that like has their stuff all packed away, but I have my stuff to look at. I don't know what else to say. Yeah. I want to look at my stuff. Yeah.
I think that's a big part of collecting, is to be able to look over your collection.
Yeah.
And to enjoy
I will tell you,
way.
in these last couple of years, kind of COVID was definitely an impetus of it, just because, all of a sudden it was like, well, now I'm not seeing people and now I'm not inviting people over and all these things, and stuff just started to pile up a little bit more and whatnot. Yeah. Where I definitely became aware that like, I certainly have too much stuff, and now it's harder to, like, I can't see the thing that's really cool because there's 6 things in front of it.
Right.
And I have been in the last like year or so in this just sort of never ending process of just trying to clear the stuff out that is less important. And don't get me wrong, it's all fucking great. But like I was joking the other day, I went into a closet and I started pulling out poster tubes. As I'm pulling out these poster tubes, I was finding all these like uncut sets of the old Topps cards, the original sets, like the reds and the blues and whatever. Yeah. And I look them up, and first of all, look, I'm not going to lie, they're selling for decent money and whatnot. But at some point you just have to go like, are these ever getting framed and going up on the wall? Yeah. Because on the wall is Star Wars 1, and it's just sort of like, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to be an asshole about it.
That?
No, exactly. Personal.
But you do find these things, and what you do also start to realize is, for example, and I'll give you another example, which is, so recently, in one of the big Heritage comic art auctions I think it was like last September, the Star Wars, I think it was the 5 cover, came up for auction. And I bought it because there's the Star Wars 5 cover.
Yeah.
And it went for a hefty price, perhaps less than I thought it was going to go even worse. But, you get rid of these other things, and then you can make room for something for like that when they do show themselves. So I have been trying to, look, I'm not a hoarder, but it creeps in. And so at some point or another, I did have to say to myself, do I need all of these gentle, giant, large size figures? And the answer kind of became, I'm going to open a couple of them at my office, and the rest maybe could be sold. And that's I've come to that point in my life a little bit, where it's sort of like, I have the original paintings of the Star Wars posters and glasses, and I have a set of the glasses, but maybe I don't need sets of the posters because I have the paintings. You know what I mean? Things like that. And again, it's just like, I am trying to, I'd like to get it down even more into just things that I really, and I'm constantly finding stuff where I remember it. I know when I got these things, but it's just like, oh man, like it's not making the wall. And I do think it's worth trying to make the wall, I guess. Yeah.
I was going to say that actually sounds like the difference between a collector and a hoarder.
Yes, I think if you don't realize that you're not going to put it up, if you're just going, I think I'm going to need this, and also the cardboard that it came in, and also the crumpled newspaper it was packed in, that could come in handy.
And the shipping label.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Then that's real hoarding. So yeah.
No.
My final question on collecting is, in the late 90s or early 2000s, a friend of mine said, hey, let's go to Forrest Ackerman's house.
Oh, yeah.
He's a sci-fi, he coined the term sci-fi, and he started Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, and he would give tours of his movie memorabilia.
The Acker Mansion, right? That's what they used to call it. Acker Mansion, yeah.
You know, he had like the great Ray Harryhausen stuff, like the skeletons from Jason and the Argonauts. And it was really so impressive, his whole layout. Would you ever consider doing something like that yourself?
I hate to say it. I mean, I could sit here and I can say to you, once upon a time, I used to think about that a little bit. You know, dare I say? It's definitely something that would have been on my mind. But, you know, I've lent things to institutions, and I would continue to do that. And I actually very proudly would share my stuff in the sense of like letting the world see it. The notion of strangers coming into my house, those days have passed.
Yeah.
Those days
that's
passed.
true.
Yeah. So.
eBay ruined that too.
It's not just that. It's just like...
No, there's an invasion of... Especially, it sounds like it's something... I mean, any collection is, but this is deeply personal too, so I feel
that's certainly true, but also just ick. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I no explanation needed.
Yeah.
How do your kids feel about your collection, or is it something you share with them? Is this something you do together?
They think it's really cool, and they certainly they like Comic-Con and they go to it, you know. And again, it's been a few years since like I go to Comic-Con and find anything like super incredible, but you find some odds and ends and whatnot. I think they think it's fascinating. They like seeing stuff. They like, you know, whether it's the movie, they like the Star Wars movies and whatever. Mm-hmm. Although, and again, this is a comment, you know, like my son was really into Star Wars in particular, and the not so much anymore.
Yeah,
like
the
TV show, like the movies and the TV shows just kind of, I don't know, kind of strangled it out of him in a weird way, which is sort of sad.
Yeah.
Still likes the original movies, and so if I get a good piece from the movies, he wants to see it.
Oh yeah.
He gets a real kick out of it. I don't know how much he cares. I mean, he definitely has liked showing friends, you know, things like that, but I don't know how much he doesn't necessarily like be like, I want to go with you to an auction, or I want to go with you, you know, whatever. But he gets a kick out of it. I don't know, you know.
Can I hold a paddle?
Yeah, somewhere in there's an answer, sort of. But I don't know. Yeah, and like you know, my sort of feeling is they can sell it all. You know, the day I'm gone, they can sell it all. It's fine with me. But yeah, I won't be there to see it, but they can do what they want with it. Yeah.
My mom always said, if there's something in the house you want, put your name on it, so that when I die, you can get it. So I'm going to send you stickies of my name. If you could just put it at least on that number one.
When my wife's, I believe, grandmother passed away, no one had ever said that at their house. And yet when this woman died, this is years before I knew my wife, they like, I don't know, like took a painting off the wall, and like on the back of it, it said she had a cousin whose nickname was Pie. And it was just said, Pie wants this on the back of like a number of items. So yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. My mother's philosophy, she collects a lot of like vintage china and stuff.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But her philosophy is she can't take it with her. So it's her daily dishes. Like she uses it all the time.
I'm actually sort of a fan of that. I have an old set of dishes that are connected. When I was, I kind of got into comedy writing at the Harvard Lampoon. Yeah. And back in the 40s, Wedgwood made a set of plates that like one of them featured the Harvard Lampoon building on it, the headquarters. Yeah. And so I have this set and a bunch of extra ones. And there's nothing that makes me happier than eating on them, because it's like the plates. What the fuck are you going to do with a plate?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
You're hang them all on the wall.
Yeah, exactly.
So now you're a great comedy writer.
Yes.
Yes.
And
next question. Yeah. Agreed.
Really good self-awareness.
I think we can all agree. I'm a great comedy writer.
So I love talking to comedians about comedy and Star Wars.
Oh my Lord. Go on. I hate talking to comedians, but go on.
Or let me say, people of a comic persuasion.
Proclivity. Yeah.
In your opinion, what do you think is effective comedic moments in Star Wars, and from those that you feel are forced or out of place?
You know, the difference for me, I guess, and most of it feels pretty good. The difference is, and you really, I hate to, unfortunately, and I don't mean to sort of dump on it, because while it's my least favorite of the three, it is fucking genius compared to everything that came after it, which is Jedi. And really, honestly, when you all of a sudden, when, for lack of a better word, the Sarlacc burps, that's crossing the line. I don't know what else to call it. It just, that's the difference. When so much of the great, here's my writing lesson for the day. What the great Star Wars character stuff, especially Harrison Ford, comes from the character of Han Solo. And you can draw that direct line. And it's a little different because obviously there's the overconfidence revealing sort of a little bit of the fuck up that we're not supposed to see, which is different. They always talk about Humphrey Bogart and Rick in Casablanca, but Rick is all kind of confidence, but earned confidence. But there's that repartee, that kind of almost borderline screwball comedy repartee of like, I came to Casablanca for the waters. What waters? I was misinformed. There's a Han Solo-esque thing to that. Yeah. But it's all in character. It's all in character. And so, boring conversation anyway, that's all in character. And that is all fucking fantastic. And the stuff between him and Leia at the top of Empire, much of it written, again, some version between Lee Brackett, one of the great writers of all time, and Lawrence Kasdan, one of the other great writers of all time. And plus, if, to read about the making of, like a lot of Harrison, not ad-libbing it, but kind of working it with Carrie Fisher and Kirshner, whatever, and things like I Love You, I Know, and it's so perfect. And, and one of the things I'll say, and it's a funny thing is, I think there's a telling point that, very famously, George Lucas did not get that and did not like it and did not think it was going to work. Yeah. And unfortunately, I will simply say, I think his sense of humor is burping Sarlaccs and frogs, Tatooine frogs. And that's unfortunately not my sense of humor. I leave it at that. I can't prove any of that, but that's the line for me.
Well, it's very subjective. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm right.
He is a great comedy writer.
No, everyone is welcome to laugh at what they want to laugh at. I am telling you, in my world, that ain't a good laugh.
No.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying yes, but you are welcome to laugh at anything you want to laugh at. Yes.
What are the top 3 elements that make Star Wars to you?
Oof. I don't know if I have an answer for that. On the one hand, it was absolutely otherworldly, but it wasn't. So whatever that is, like it was not our world. It was somewhere else, but it was our world. But that it was like that perfect mix in a way that. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I think I may have the word, and I may stumble on pronouncing it. It's a new word I just invented. Familialian. So it's familiar with alien.
Maybe.
Familial.
All right.
It's both alien and familiar.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. And
I'll keep working on it.
Yeah, keep working on it. Let's workshop that. And it's funny because again, when it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So like, for example, and I hate to say this, I don't even know which of those movies, whichever movie where they ended up on like the casino planet or whatever that was. And
the Last Jedi.
Is that the middle one or is it the third one?
I'm sorry. Yeah, the Ryan Johnson.
Yeah. And there are things in that movie I like, but the casino world, me no like. And
I do fast forward through that.
It just like, and I can't explain it because it's just like at some point, like I don't want them having a casino, but if it does have a casino, it looks too much like an Earth. I don't know. Like there's a weird line, and maybe it's for other people, it's elsewhere, but somehow My least favorite part of Star Wars, it's a funny thing, as the shows and movies have progressed and they have felt the need to show quote unquote bigger cities, I hate Star Wars more. Like when they are forced to confront larger populations,
Right.
it starts to either bore me or look too much like Earth or a combination of it bores me and it looks too much like Earth. Bespin is as crowded as I want to start. Like the original Tatooine and like just seemed right, and Bespin seemed right, and then these various ships and whatever. But by the time they start kind of like welcome to Coruscant and whatever the fuck, it just somehow it broke. It's like, again, I don't know what the rules were. But for me, it started to break some of those rules. So I don't know. That's number one, the sort of familiar but not familiar, wherever that fits in. And again, this is, and everything is going to be like a this but not that. It's like, I do love that there are all of these sort of mythic themes, big sort of like, and again, I know there's all the Joseph Campbell stuff, whatever, but yet never hits you over the head with it, which of course later on, it did hit you over the head. When it hits you over the head, it ain't so good. But when it's in there was just something about the way he baked it all in. And I don't know, that just really somehow worked. And in some ways, I think some of that was because of the limitations. In a weird way, to me, the movies got worse when he could do whatever he wanted. And I think that's sort of true kind of across the board. I saw this incredible interview. I don't know what anniversary it would have been. It would have been in like maybe the late 90s with Kirshner. So whatever Empire, what would that have been? Like maybe a 25th or 30th, maybe a 30th anniversary. Yeah, they had I think he was still alive then. They had a screening at the ArcLight here in LA, and he was there, and he was talking on and on and on about just how much they were freaked out about Yoda and making those scenes work because it's a fucking puppet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've heard Mark Hamill talk about it as well, about how he kind of like memorized not only his side of the dialogue, but Yoda's side of the dialogue so that he just knew the scenes backwards and forwards. And then as they started working on it with Frank Oz, they started adding all those bits of business about Yoda, like looking for the stuff, because they were trying to do anything they could to keep the scene alive and not let you think about the fact that it's a puppet and you can't see its feet. And in their quest to do all of this stuff, as he put it, it was sort of like creativity being blocked by basically the puppet and the limitations of the puppet and all these things. And as he said it, it was sort of like creativity meets limitations and then how it gets around or over those limitations. Yes. And he said, that's art. And it's one of the greatest explanations I've ever heard. And to me, it speaks to the strength, especially of the first two of the original trilogy. Yeah. By the third, you're almost up to, we can do anything we want. And then now, I just don't know what to say. So I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, in there, one of the great explanations of art I've ever heard. So.
Wow, that blew me away.
I don't have a third one. I don't know what we were
That's okay.
Yeah.
Lightsabers.
Yes.
Lightsabers can always be a good
pew,
third
pew,
one.
pew sound. Yeah. That's the other thing that really makes it great. Yeah.
Ben Burtt's sound design.
Well, Ben Burtt's sound is incredible. I'm not certainly it is absolutely fucking incredible. Yeah, I mean, look, on some level there is the tech. I mean, again, I just talked about like the idea of not being able to do anything you wanted, but yet, at some point the technological advances, going back to all that, Dijkstraflex and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that space where you were like, where space battles became dogfights, it definitely changed everything, in a way. So I'll put that one in there. Yeah.
What is your favorite Star Wars memory?
Well, the old one probably would have been, going, obviously, seeing it the first time. I mean, that's a great memory. Yep. Other good memories when Empire and Jedi opened up, and obviously I was a little bit older, but not super old. Obviously, Empire is 80 or 81. I can't remember. So
80.
I'm 10 and then just 13, but like lining up like that Wednesday morning, like that they came out the Wednesday before Memorial Day, and like we used to have a day where we didn't have school that Wednesday, and so we would line up like at lining up with my friends. And then the most recent one being when my daughter turned 7, I rented a theater here in LA, and I own a print. I own a print of the non-special edition Star Wars. And I rented a theater and basically showed it to her, my son, who was a little young, but that's okay. And basically all my sort of contemporaries and their kids. And so that there's a big group of my kids and their friends parents that got to see Star Wars on a theater screen, non-special edition, when they turned like 7. And that's a pretty good memory. So yeah.
I'm so jealous.
Pretty amazing memory.
That's so rad. Yeah.
So are you still looking for 2 kids to adopt?
Yeah.
And is 50
How
too old?
How old would they be?
50 and 30. Let's just say. Our final question for you.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about your amazing collection, your journey from seeing Star Wars to reading the comic books to going down to Comic-Con and collecting figures. After everything we've discussed, can you say what Star Wars mean to you?
I don't know if I can say what Star Wars means to me, but I very much feel like I would not be doing what I'm doing. And I know I sort of said a version of this, but I think it has been this creative inspiration that, again, it's not a straight line where like I saw Star Wars and said, I'm going to be a comedy writer. But there was something about Star Wars that for me set off a bulb just about movies and movie making and all aspects of like sort of, and just got me into reading about things and then into starting to read screenplays or even wanting to and whatever. And so for me, it's just very much this like part of my being that sort of, and again, maybe some other movie would have done it, who knows? But it for me, it sort of sent me down a path that I feel very indebted to it. And I guess that's part of it for me.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's really wonderful. It's interesting how I think Lucas said he wanted to give kids hope in 77. And what he did was gave kids the curiosity to find out how film was made. I think it goes back to Hammerhead. You see Hammerhead, you go, how is that done?
No, but I mean, again, it's like again, we were talking about like early collecting, and again, there wasn't a lot, but like the original, The Art of Star Wars book, which was, had like a lot of art in it, and just the idea that you could buy like the McQuarrie portfolio and see like, oh, I see somebody drew this and then they made it. And again, even when I didn't know exactly how and the whatever, just like a lot of that early collecting was sort of like, again, about like the who and the how and the what, and just like in my desire to know everything about Star Wars, I sort of found myself getting very hooked in the world of entertainment, I guess, in some way.
Wow.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
David, where can people find you?
I'm on all the various social medias at David H. Mandel, and you can go there to get a little political comedy, a little anti-Trump rabble-rousing, occasional Star Wars references and things things from my collection also. And then you guys were kind enough to mention earlier, I co-host the Stuff Dreams Are Made Of, which is on all your better podcast homes. And we talk about movie props and collecting. I mean, and Star Wars comes up a lot, as they say. So if you're interested, check it out. Yeah, so thank you.
And it's a great show to listen to, especially if you're into if you're into movies. Really,
I think if you collect anything, I've heard from people that like don't even collect movie stuff, but just like I think if you've got that, we always say like you're either a collector or you're not. And if you've got that collecting gene, you sort of, I think, get a kick out of it. It's very much just 2 guys obsessing about collecting. So yeah,
and that's one of the fun part about collecting too is finding other collectors and talking to each other about
absolutely.
their collection.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's funny, I can sit here and say I've met a lot of great people. I've also met a lot of horrible people, but yeah, I've met some people. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm always very fond of saying, just because you like Star Wars doesn't mean I want to eat a meal with you. But anyway, yeah. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we're not on the bad list.
We'll see. We'll see.
Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you guys.
And talking Star Wars. This was so much fun.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, this is Dave, and before we get to the show, I wanted to ask you a favor. One of our goals this year is to grow the show so that What Does Star Wars Mean to You reaches more listeners. And that's where we're asking you for help. And it's really easy. Wherever you listen to us, please hit that subscribe button. If you're liking the show, give us a 5-star rating and review on the platform you listen to us. We make a lot of fun of the algorithm and the smash that button thing, but it really does help us get noticed by new fans. And if you want to join in on the conversation, find us on social at Star Wars Mean to You. That's Star Wars Mean, the number 2 in the letter U. Now, let's chat some Star Wars.